The gold October light of late afternoon made the restaurant booth look like a stage set, and Leo felt like an understudy who'd forgotten all his lines. He saw her first. Mara, her photo, hadn't lied. Dark hair falling in a soft wave over one shoulder. Intelligent eyes scanning the room. A hesitant half-smile. She was beautiful in a real, unpolished way that made his breath catch. Then his gaze dropped, and the world tilted. Nestled against her side, small fingers tangled in the fabric of her coat, was a child. A little girl, maybe 4, with a wild crown of curly brown hair, and serious, observant eyes that were already fixed on him. His online dating profile: enjoy quiet dinners, long walks, no drama scene to scream from the past. A single, child-free 32-year-old accountant. He'd sought the same. Simplicity. Order. Predictable sums that always tallied. His feet, polished loafers on the worn diner tile, did not move. Walking away was the logical sum. This was a fundamental mismatch of variables. But her eyes found his then, and they weren't pleading or apologetic. They were just tired and braced for his retreat. That quiet defiance held him in place. Leo, she asked as he reached the table, her voice lower than he'd imagined. Mara, hi. He slid into the booth opposite them. The little girl scrutinized him, then buried her face in Mara's arm. This is Ellie, Mara said, her hand automatically smoothing the child's hair. Our sitter fell through last minute. I almost canceled. But you wanted to see if I'd run, Leo finished softly. A faint blush colored her cheeks. Something like that. Ellie chose that moment to emerge, holding up a grubby, one-eyed stuffed rabbit. Bobby's hungry. The next hour was not a date. It was a chaotic, syrup-scented ballet. Ellie demanded pancakes. Mara tried to negotiate vegetables. Leo, in a move that surprised himself, flagged the waitress and ordered the pancakes. With a side of blueberries for Bobby, Ellie awarded him a look of grave approval. Conversation stuttered around the child's dropped fork. A urgent whisper about the bathroom. A sudden, profound question about why the ketchup bottle was shaped like a tomato. Yet, in the fragments, something flickered. Mara was a freelance graphic designer. She loved old movie posters and hated cilantro. She'd been widowed 2 years ago. The word widowed landed between them, quiet and heavy. Ellie's father, a firefighter, had never come home from a warehouse fire. I'm so sorry, Leo said, the sentiment utterly inadequate. Mara just nodded, her eyes on Ellie, who is now carefully feeding blueberries to her rabbit. She's the best piece of him I have left. On his way back from the men's room, Leo paused unseen. Ellie was standing on the booth seat, her small hands framing Mara's face, their foreheads touching. Do you like him, Mommy? She whispered, loud enough for Leo to hear. I don't know yet. Bug, Mara whispered back. Is he nice? Ellie thought for a moment. He got Bobby blueberries. Bobby says, thank you. Leo's chest tightened with an emotion he couldn't name. It wasn't just attraction to Mara, though that was there. A sharp, sweet pull. It was the totality of him. The weary, fierce love between them was a country he had no map for, but suddenly, desperately wanted to explore. When the check came, Ellie was asleep, a sticky, serene weight against Mara's chest. I had a really good time, Leo said, and meant it. Mara's brave facade finally cracked, showing a glimpse of vulnerability. You're a rare one, Leo. Most men see a ready-made family and it's a sprint to the door. Can I see you again? The question left him before he could vet it for logic. Maybe just you and me next time. Or, you know, all 3 of us. However it works. Tears glistened in her eyes, but she blinked them away. Yes, she said simply. For the next 3 months, Leo didn't just walk into their lives. He carefully, reverently, built a space for himself within them. Dates were picnics in the park where Ellie chased squirrels. Evenings were spent on Mara's couch, Ellie asleep between them after a movie. He learned Ellie's favorite dinosaur, Triceratops, her fear of the loud hand dryer in public bathrooms, the way she hummed when she colored. He fell in love with Mara's laugh, the concentration line between her eyebrows when she worked, the way she still talked to her husband's photo on the bookshelf sometimes, saying, see, we're okay. He was all in. The night he told Mara he loved her, under the stutter of rain on her apartment window, she cried and kissed him and said, I love you too. It scares me how much. The proposal was planned for a weekend trip to a lakeside cabin. He had the ring. He'd even practiced asking Ellie for permission. Can I be on your team forever? He felt, for the first time, that his life was not a series of neat columns, but a glorious, messy, perfect painting. But Friday they were to leave. Mara called, her voice strangled. Leo, it's Ellie. She's running a fever. Really high. She's limp. We're at Children's Hospital. The world froze. He drove to the hospital in a blur, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. In the sterile, beige room, Ellie looked tiny and swallowed by wires and tubes. Mara was a statue of anguish by the bed, holding one small, listless hand. A doctor in a white coat entered, her face professionally neutral. Ms. Reed, we have the initial blood test results back. She glanced at Leo, a question in her eyes. He's family, Mara said, the words giving Leo a jolt of fierce pride and terror. The doctor nodded. It's not meningitis, which is good, but we've found some. Concerning markers, the number of blast cells in her peripheral blood is highly elevated. We need to run more tests immediately, but we are strongly suspecting acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The diagnosis hung in the air, a poison gas. Mara made a sound, a raw, animal whimper, and crumpled into Leo's arms. He held her, staring over her shaking shoulders at the little girl who loved blueberries and her one-eyed rabbit. The future they'd painted, the proposal, the cabin, the life, all vaporized in the clinical glare of the room. There was only now, this dot, and he did not walk away. He held Mara tighter. "We'll fight this," he whispered into her hair, his own voice breaking. "We'll fight this together." The hospital became their new world, a fluorescent-lit universe of shifting shifts and beeping monitors. Leo took a leave of absence from his firm. His ordered life of spreadsheets and quiet dinners was replaced by a crash course in medical terminology, the careful recording of Ellie's vitals, and the gentle art of coaxing a nauseated child to take a sip of electrolyte drink. The initial storm of fear settled into a grueling, gray siege. Chemotherapy began. Ellie's glorious curls fell out in clumps on her Dora the Explorer pillowcase. Leo was there when Mara shaved the rest, his own eyes swimming as he held Ellie's tiny, trusting hand. Ellie, pale and fragile, touched her bald head and whispered, "I'm a shiny egg." Leo's proposal ring sat in his sock drawer. The timing was obscene. Instead, his love became action, holding basins, learning to clean the central line port. In her tiny chest, reading Goodnight Moon until he could recite it in his sleep. He was the steady hand when Mara shook. He was the one who could make Ellie give a weak smile with his silly Donald Duck impression. One grueling evening, after a particularly brutal round of chemo, Ellie was finally asleep. Mara and Leo slumped in the awful vinyl chairs of the family lounge, exhaustion living in their bones. "You don't have to do this," Mara said suddenly, her voice hollow. She wouldn't look at him. This is my war. You signed up for a date, Leo, not a terminal siege in a pediatric oncology ward. He knelt before her, taking her cold hands. "I love you. I love her. There is no have to. There's only get to. I get to be here. I get to fight for her. For us." She finally met his eyes, and the raw, desperate love and terror he saw there stole his breath. "What if we lose?" she choked out. "Then we lose together," he said, and it was the most heartbreaking vow he'd ever made. Months bled together. There was good news. The cancer was in remission. They brought Ellie home, a cautious, joyful celebration. The ring in the sock drawer began to feel warm with possibility again. Then, the devastating news. A routine checkup showed it was back, more aggressive. The doctor used the word experimental. The odds were long. A bone marrow transplant was her only real chance. Neither Mara nor any listed relatives were a match. The National Registry turned up nothing. One night, sitting at Ellie's bedside as she slept, a strange, persistent thought entered Leo's mind. It was absurd, illogical, but it wouldn't leave. He looked at her pale face, the shape of her nose, the curve of her ear. A memory flashed, his own baby picture, bald after a childhood bout of scarlet fever. The resemblance was a trick of the light, of love, surely. Yet the thought became an obsession. He began secretly poring over the dates. Mara had gotten pregnant shortly before her husband died. Ellie was conceived, about 9 months before her birth. Obviously. But what if? He remembered Mara once saying, offhand, that she'd gone on a trip just before her husband's last shift. A work conference in the city where Leo had lived. A hotel bar. A lonely, profound night after a painful breakup. A kind, funny stranger whose name he'd never asked, and who had given a false one. A connection that felt like a lifeline. A memory he'd tucked away as a bittersweet, anonymous moment of human comfort. His heart began to hammer against his ribs, a frantic, terrifying rhythm. Without telling Mara, he ordered a paternity test. The process was clandestine, complicated, racked with guilt. Using a discarded juice box from Ellie, a lab he found online, and a sum of money that would have paid for a honeymoon. He told Mara he was dealing with some stress-related paperwork from his firm. The 2-week wait was its own kind of hell. He watched Ellie, now looking for himself in her. The way she crinkled her nose when she laughed. The shape of her eyebrows. It was madness. Hope's cruelest trick. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. Mara was asleep on the cot in Ellie's room. Leo opened it in the hospital cafeteria, his hands trembling so violently he could barely click the mouse. Probability of paternity 99.9997%. The world did not tilt. It shattered and reassembled into a horrifying, luminous, heartbreaking new shape. The air left his lungs. He was Ellie's father, the anonymous woman from the bar. The one fleeting night of grief and connection years ago. That had been Mara. He had a child. Ellie was his child. His blind date had come with her child, their child, and he hadn't walked away. He had been drawn to her by an invisible atomic thread of shared DNA, a pull deeper than logic or preference. He had fallen in love with his own daughter before he even knew she was his. A sob, half agony, half insane, rapturous joy, choked him. He was a match. He could save her. He would save her. He ran back to the room, the printout clutched in his hand. Mara was awake, wiping Ellie's forehead with a cool cloth. She looked up, saw his face a mask of tears, wonder, and anguish. Leo, what's wrong? He couldn't speak. He just handed her the paper. She read it, her face blank at first, then confused, then slowly dawning with a shock so profound her entire body seemed to flinch. Her eyes flew from the paper to his face, searching, the past crashing into the present. The memory ignited in her own eyes, the hotel bar, the kind stranger, the one-night solace before the cataclysm of her husband's death. She had never made the connection. How could she? She breathed, the word a whisper of utter devastation. It was you. Ellie stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She saw Leo crying, and her small, pale hand reached out for him. Don't cry, Leo, she murmured, her voice thready. He took her hand, his touch now that of a father. He looked at Mara, her world destroyed and remade in the same instant. The love of his life was looking at him with the horror of a beautiful, terrible truth. I'm a match, he said, his voice cracking with the weight of a miracle and a tragedy fused together. I can save our daughter. In that sterile room, filled with the quiet hum of machines that kept his child alive, the man who hadn't walked away finally understood the cruel, beautiful geometry of fate. He had found his soulmate and his child in one heartbreaking package, and the love that would save them was also the secret that might tear them all apart. The twist wasn't just in the past. It was the foundation of their fragile, terrifying, hopeful future.